Hey everyone, it's me, Danny, and I'd like to welcome you back to the Hidden Book Nook, the channel where we explore books beyond the bestseller list. Today's book is Your Christian Worldview, Using Intellectual Honesty to Navigate Current Events, Ethical Issues, and a Confused Culture by Dolislager. This is a substantial work that tackles some of the biggest questions people ask about faith, truth, morality, culture, science, politics, and how Christians should think about the modern world. What makes this book stand out isn't simply that it's a Christian book. There are thousands of those. What makes it interesting is that Dolislager frames his entire discussion around the concept of intellectual honesty. Rather than asking readers to accept conclusions blindly, he repeatedly encourages examination, testing assumptions, and understanding why people believe what they believe. Today I'll discuss what the book is about, what works particularly well, where readers may find challenges, the author's writing style, and who I think will get the most value from it. Let's dive in. At its core, this book is about worldview. A worldview is essentially the lens through which we interpret reality. It's the collection of assumptions, beliefs, values, and principles that shape how we understand the world around us. Dolislager argues that everyone has a worldview whether or not they realize it. The book is divided into three major sections. The first section focuses on worldview foundations. Here the author explores questions such as, what is a worldview? Where does human identity come from? What is the source of moral authority? What role should Scripture play in shaping beliefs? The second section examines how worldviews are tested. This includes discussions about science and faith, cultural influences, cognitive biases, intellectual honesty, and how people develop their beliefs. The third section applies these ideas to contemporary issues. Topics include media influence, misinformation, ethics, justice, politics, cultural conflict, and social engagement. Throughout the book, the author consistently returns to one central idea. Before debating individual issues, we need to understand the foundational beliefs that drive our conclusions. In many ways, the book is less about winning arguments and more about understanding the assumptions behind them. What the book does well. One of the strongest aspects of this book is its organization. Dolislager structures his arguments carefully and methodically. Each chapter builds upon previous chapters, creating a logical progression. Readers are rarely left wondering why a particular topic has appeared because each discussion connects to the larger framework of worldview development. Another strength is accessibility. Despite discussing philosophy, theology, ethics, and cultural analysis, the book remains approachable. You don't need a degree in theology or philosophy to follow the author's reasoning. He explains concepts clearly and frequently, uses examples to illustrate abstract ideas. The house analogy introduced early in the book is particularly effective. The foundation represents core beliefs. The walls represent conclusions that grow from these beliefs. The rooms represent specific convictions, and the roof represents how those beliefs perform under pressure. It's a memorable way to explain why underlying assumptions matter. Another positive aspect is the author's emphasis on self-examination. Many worldview books focus heavily on critiquing opposing viewpoints. While the book certainly critiques alternative perspectives, it also challenges Christians to examine inconsistencies within their own thinking. That emphasis on internal consistency gives the book a reflective quality. Readers are repeatedly encouraged to ask, what do I believe? Why do I believe it? Do my beliefs actually fit together? That level of introspection can be valuable regardless of whether someone agrees with every conclusion. The book also tackles contemporary issues in a way that feels relevant. Rather than remaining in abstract theological territory, The author attempts to connect worldview concepts to real-world concerns. Readers interested in understanding how belief systems influence politics, culture, media, and ethics will likely appreciate those discussions. Areas that may divide readers. As with many books focused on worldview and faith, this is not a neutral work. The author's goal is ultimately to defend a Christian worldview. Readers who already share many of his assumptions will likely find the arguments affirming and encouraging. Readers coming from secular, agnostic, atheist, or non-Christian perspectives may find some conclusions less persuasive. That's not necessarily a criticism. It's simply important to understand what kind of book this is. Dolislager writes from a clearly stated position. The book isn't trying to present every worldview as equally valid. Instead, it seeks to explain why the author believes the Christian worldview provides the most coherent explanation of reality. Some readers will appreciate that clarity. Others may wish for more extensive engagement with opposing viewpoints. The sections comparing Christianity to alternative belief systems will likely generate discussion and disagreement among readers. But even where disagreement exists, the author consistently encourages thoughtful examination rather than dismissal. That emphasis on honest evaluation helps keep the conversation productive. The author's writing style. Let's talk about writing style because it's one of the more interesting aspects of this book. Thomas Dolislager writes in a straightforward, instructional manner. His style reminds me of a professor, mentor, or seminar leader guiding readers through a series of interconnected ideas. He avoids overly academic language whenever possible. Instead of overwhelming readers with jargon, he breaks concepts into manageable pieces. The prose is clean and direct. Sentences tend to be concise. Arguments are structured logically. Readers who enjoy clarity and organization will likely appreciate this approach. Another notable feature is the author's frequent use of illustrations and examples. He regularly moves between theory and practical application. Rather than leaving ideas floating in abstraction, he attempts to show how they affect everyday life. The writing also has a conversational quality at times. Personal stories and examples help humanize discussions that could otherwise become overly philosophical. The tone is confident but generally measured. Even when discussing controversial subjects, the author tends to focus on explaining reasoning rather than simply making declarations. Overall, the writing prioritizes clarity over literary flourish. This is not a poetic or highly stylized book. It is a teaching-oriented book designed to help readers think through complex issues systematically. And for the goals of the book, that approach works well. Who should read this book? Who should read this book? One of the questions I always ask when reviewing a book is not simply, is this a good book? But rather, who is this book for? Because the truth is that not every book is meant for every reader. And your Christian worldview is a great example of that. This book has a very specific audience in mind, and understanding that audience will help you decide whether it's worth your time. Christians seeking a stronger foundation. The first group I would recommend this book to is Christians who want a deeper understanding of why they believe what they believe. Many people grow up in church and become familiar with Christian teachings, but they never really stop to examine the foundations underneath those teachings. They know what they believe, but they may struggle to explain why. This book attempts to address that problem. Rather than focusing exclusively on Bible study or devotional content, it encourages readers to think critically about the assumptions that shape their understanding of the world. If you've ever found yourself wondering, why do I believe Christianity is true? How do I defend my beliefs when challenged? What makes a Christian worldview different from a secular worldview? Then this book was largely written for you. The author spends considerable time exploring the foundations of belief rather than simply presenting conclusions. For Christians who want a stronger intellectual framework for their faith, there is a great deal here to consider. I also think this book is valuable for newer Christians or people returning to their faith after being away. Many new believers quickly discover that faith raises as many questions as it answers. Questions about science, about morality, questions about culture or politics, questions about truth. Sometimes those questions can feel overwhelming. This book attempts to create a roadmap for navigating those conversations. Now, I wouldn't necessarily call it a beginner-level introduction to Christianity because some sections deal with fairly substantial philosophical concepts. However, the writing remains accessible enough that motivated readers should be able to follow along. For someone who is trying to build a coherent framework for understanding the Christian faith in today's world, this book could serve as a useful guide. Another audience that will likely appreciate this book is readers interested in Christian apologetics. If you're unfamiliar with the term, apologetics is essentially the practice of explaining and defending Christian beliefs through reasoned arguments. Many apologetics books focus heavily on evidence. They discuss archaeology, historical records, scientific discoveries, philosophical arguments. This book certainly includes some of those discussions, but its primary focus is somewhat different. Rather than concentrating solely on proving Christianity, Dolislager spends a significant amount of time examining how worldviews are constructed in the first place. That makes this book feel more foundational than some traditional apologetics works. Instead of asking only, is Christianity true? The book also asks, what assumptions are people bringing into this conversation? What standards are they using to evaluate truth? What authority are they trusting? For readers who enjoy thoughtful discussions about faith and reason, those questions can be incredibly engaging. I also think students would benefit from this book. Whether you're a high school student, a college student, or simply someone who loves learning, the book encourages intellectual curiosity. One of the themes that appears repeatedly throughout the text is the importance of examining ideas honestly. The author argues that truth should not be feared. Instead, it should be investigated. That message is particularly valuable in a culture where people are often encouraged to remain inside ideological bubbles. Students frequently encounter competing viewpoints. Professors, friends, social media, news outlets, books, podcasts. Everyone seems to be presenting a different explanation of reality. This book encourages readers to step back and ask a deeper question. What worldview is shaping these conclusions? Even readers who ultimately disagree with the author's conclusions may find value in learning how to identify the assumptions behind various arguments. That's a useful skill, regardless of your beliefs. Pastors, ministry leaders, Bible study leaders, and small group facilitators may also find this book useful. Many churches spend considerable time teaching biblical principles, but less time discussing worldview formation. As a result, believers sometimes struggle to connect biblical teachings with everyday cultural issues. This book attempts to bridge that gap. Its chapter structure naturally lends itself to discussion. Many chapters end with reflection, questions that encourage readers to think more deeply about the material. Because of that, I could easily see portions of this book being used in church discussion groups, adult education classes, or discipleship programs. The author's teaching-oriented style makes the material accessible for group study. You don't have to be interested exclusively in theology to appreciate parts of this book. If you're fascinated by culture, politics, ethics, media, and social trends, you'll probably find sections that resonate with you. One of the author's recurring arguments is that cultural conflicts rarely begin at the surface level. People often argue about politics, laws, and social issues. But beneath those disagreements are deeper assumptions about identity, authority, morality, and truth. Whether you agree with his conclusions or not, that's an interesting lens through which to view modern society. Readers who enjoy exploring the why behind cultural disagreements may find these discussions particularly engaging. The book is also a good fit for readers who enjoy books that may make them stop and think. This is not a fast-paced narrative. It's not packed with dramatic stories. It's not designed to entertain in the traditional sense. Instead, it invites reflection. You may find yourself reading a few pages, then pausing to consider your own beliefs. You may find yourself agreeing with certain arguments and questioning others. You may find yourself taking notes or discussing chapters with friends. In my experience, some of the most memorable nonfiction books are not necessarily the ones that provide all the answers. They're the ones that provoke meaningful questions. This book definitely falls into that category. Who might not enjoy this book? It's also worth mentioning who this book may not be for. If you're looking for a devotional filled with personal stories, inspiration, and encouragement, this probably isn't the best fit. If you're looking for a casual Christian read that can be finished in a weekend without much thought, this may feel too analytical. And if you're hoping for a completely neutral examination of multiple worldviews, that's not really the author's goal. Dolislager writes from a Christian perspective and openly advocates for that perspective throughout the book. There's nothing hidden about his intentions. Readers who strongly prefer strictly objective or purely academic approaches may find themselves wanting more engagement with alternative viewpoints. That doesn't mean those readers won't find value here. It simply means they should understand what kind of book they're picking up. If I had to summarize the ideal reader in a single sentence, it would be this. This book is for people who want to think deeply about faith, truth, culture, and the foundations of belief. Whether you're a committed Christian looking to strengthen your worldview, a student exploring big questions, a church leader seeking discussion material, or simply a curious reader interested in how people make sense of the world, there is likely something here that will challenge you to think more carefully. And ultimately, that's one of the book's greatest strengths. It doesn't simply ask readers to accept conclusions. It asks them to examine the foundations beneath those conclusions. And regardless of where you stand on matters of faith, that's an exercise worth undertaking. So what did I think overall? Your Christian worldview is an ambitious and thoughtful exploration of how beliefs shape our understanding of reality. Its greatest strength is its focus on intellectual honesty and self-examination. Rather than simply telling readers what to think, the author repeatedly asks them to consider why they think what they think. The book is organized, accessible, and deeply reflective. Whether readers agree with all of its conclusions or not, it succeeds in encouraging serious engagement with important questions. Questions about truth, about identity, questions about morality, and questions about how we navigate an increasingly complex world. For readers seeking a faith-centered exploration of those issues, this book offers a substantial and thought-provoking journey. And that's exactly the kind of gem we love discussing here on Hidden Book Nook. If you've read this book, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another review. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time in the Hidden Book Nook.